G'day everyone. Michael McNally, how are you? Good to see you. Paul and Roz, great to see you guys. Kay and hello. Everyone's busy getting organised. Indeed, Craig. Bring on pink stuff. Absolutely. Well, it's a beautiful day here. I don't know what it's like where you are, but the sun is shining. Jill and Richard have taken the dogs for a walk, so it's quite peaceful at the moment. And we're going to drink some Pinot Gris on skins. How good is that? Karen's already sent me a picture of what they're eating, and that looks delicious, some dumplings and things. So I hope you found some pink food to match to your pink wine. I hope you've got your sensible glass of water, which I already drank half of mine because I've been driving around like a mad thing all day today. Always good to rehydrate on the water before you start drinking the wine. That's Kate's number one tip, as you all know. So, hope you've all had a lovely week. Hello, Peter. How are you going? I thought I might have been here with you, well, actually at home with COVID this week because I caught up with some people halfway through last week who were my little close contacts, but I've managed to avoid it again, which is fantastic. I even managed to go out for dinner on Saturday night, which was awesome. Caught up with a couple of you guys out there, which was unreal. Very well, thank you, Pete. I'll be even better once I get some wine in my glass. See, I can't even speak. So let's get this happening. Hello, Sue and Daryl. How you doing? Okay, that sounds lovely. Pan-fried salmon, tomato, capsicum, red lentil soup. That will be a challenge for the wine, I reckon, the capsicum and the red lentils. Hello, Shell. I thought you might be here with some sushi and sashimi. So, Pinot glass, because I like, hello, Sarah. Hello to all the tricks. Great to see you. Pinot glass, because I think with a wine like this, you want to get lots of air into it. You want to be able to swirl it around because this is, woo. And some of you tasted this with me. Yeah, I reckon, Kate, it might be interesting. It might be slightly challenging, but it might also be interesting, the old red capsicum. And I was talking to Laura recently about, I'm not sure if she's here yet, about pesto with this wine. And I think that it could work really well. But we have an issue with pine nuts these days, which I will talk about in a little while. Let's talk about the wine first. Hello, Matt and Renee. Lovely to see you guys again. Welcome back. Okay, so what's the wine? 2020 Pinot Gris on skins. Beautiful. Oh, Craig, that'll be nice. Bruschetta, tomato bruschetta. I think that would be very good, actually. The tomato will work. Olive oil, bread, a little bit of basil on top. This wine will cope with that. There's just a couple of things that might be slightly challenging. Oh, Laura, you are there. Excellent. Newborn, that's all right. The wine will come, I'm sure. Don't rush the baby. All right, let's get this wine open for the rest of us. Showing off the label and the beautiful colour. Yum, Craig, fantastic. Did you grow them yourself? I've had a really poor crack at tomatoes again this year. I'm starting to think maybe I'm not a very good gardener. I'm starting to think. I've put a lot of effort into it in the last 2 years and it hasn't really paid off hugely. Luckily, I have friends who are very good gardeners. Right, Rob, speaking of friends who are very good gardeners, hello, Rob, Deb, Alison, Andrew, Cotty, John, and Jeff. Oh, my God, you guys are crazy. You're having a little drinks with Kate party down the road. How fabulous. All right, let's get some wine in the glass. You'll notice that my bottle is not glistening with sweat beads because I haven't had it in the fridge at all, which is slightly rebellious of me. Oh, okay, Craig, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's had disastrous tomatoes. It's very disappointing. It's been weird. Oh, by the way, we're starting vintage tomorrow. Very exciting. Picking Robinson Chardonnay tomorrow, which is very exciting news. And next week, we're drinking Robinson Chardonnay. So that's almost perfect timing. Hello, Emily and Kevin. How are you? Welcome back. Awesome to see you. So, Pinot Gris on skins. Cheers, everyone. Isn't that colour amazing? I know we've tasted this wine before and we've had previous vintages of it, and I think that the 2020 has got such a beautiful salmon orange kind of tinge to it. It's a little bit paler than some of the previous vintages. It's slightly more orange. It's so pretty. You'll notice I'm swirling hard because I like to get, it's only 2020, it's quite young. I like to get lots of air into it as quickly as possible so that I can really get those aromas coming up out of the glass. And that's exactly what's happening now. We've got really beautiful heady aromas coming out of the glass. Rose petals for sure. There's little midges in here. So if I'm doing this, I might be waving at you, but I'm also possibly trying to flick flies away. Whoop, nearly spilled it on the computer. Better stop swirling quite so excitedly. Rose petals, some really lovely pickled ginger. There is almost a sort of a tomato sweetness to the aroma as well, which I think is really intriguing. There's some other things going on in here which are quite difficult to describe. So we'll come back to the nose in a minute. I will talk to you a little bit about how this wine's been made. Some of you have heard it before, so hopefully I'll tell it slightly differently again today, but some of you haven't. Oh, thank you, Craig. I think it's a bit of a special, unique wine as well, and it's always nice to come back to it when you sort of had a little while ago, and matching it with different foods will always do different things. So Pinot Gris on skins, it's exactly what it says on the label, which comes back to the McIntyre inability to think of sexy names for wines. But what we basically did was pick the Pinot Gris and made it the same way that we make Pinot Noir. So it's fermented on skins for the whole fermentation process, and that's how you get not only that amazing colour in the wine, but also that beautiful palate texture, different aromas from what we get from our white Pinot Gris, and really beautiful tannins. So it's a very light red wine rather than a white wine, which is why I said don't serve it too cold. If you have just pulled it out of the fridge and it's a bit cold and it's not really talking to you yet, it's quite a warm day, so it will warm up quite quickly, but you can put your hands around the glass and that will warm it up quicker. Hello, Jack and Zach and Hannah. Lovely to see you. Oh, technical issues. Technical issues are annoying, so welcome. I hope you've got a glass of wine at least in your hands. And I'm glad that you're enjoying it with the tomatoes and mozzarella. That was a real revelation for me. So let me have a little sip and then I'll tell you some stories. Hang on a sec. So when I talk about rose petals, those of you who've been here know that Jill has got the most incredible rose garden out the front of cellar door. And almost all of her roses are old-fashioned perfumed roses. So if you ever want to know what different coloured roses smell like and you've never had the opportunity, you just need to come to Moorooduc during rose blooming season and walk through the garden and smell the different roses, because pink roses smell very different from white roses, have a very different perfume from those dark red, black coloured roses, and yellow roses also have very different smell. For me, this is sort of those very pale, creamy pink roses that you get the petals in potpourri. There's that little kind of almost dried rose petal character there. There's a little bit of lavender coming up as well. There's some herbs and some floral notes, as well as those kind of pickled plum, pickled ginger, almost sort of Japanesey kind of aromatics there on the Oh, Narim and Keely are here. Hello, welcome. Sorry, I can't speak today. I've been driving around like a lunatic. I'll tell you that story later for anyone who can be bothered to hang around and listen to it. Back to the wine though. On the palate, it's quite savoury, it's quite vinous, it's got lots of tannin going on. And the first time we made this wine in 2015, we really had no idea what it was going to smell like, what it was going to taste like, what food it was going to work with. And so, hello, Nigel, how you going? The skins is looking so good now, isn't it? Yeah, it's, as I say, it's always nice to come back to a wine that we've tasted before because they always change. So when we'd made the 2015, it'd been sort of in bottle for maybe a month or two. And we did our annual tomato passata day here. Here's Polly. Hello, Polly. You had a nice walk? I'm just talking to my friends on the computer. Hello, don't get tangled up in the wires. So we'd made this fresh passata, and this Italian friend of ours would cook up all of the imperfect tomatoes. And Craig, I'm not blushing yet. I don't approve of wines called blush, so I'm going to move away from that one. But we cooked up all the imperfect tomatoes that weren't okay to go in the sauce, and we made this incredible, just tomato, garlic, salt, pepper, lots of olive oil, tomato sauce. Served it with fresh pasta, and Dad said, "Oh, we should try the Pinot Gris on skins," and it was the most incredible food match. So I've always said it works really well with spice. It works really well with the ginger prawn dumplings. Would be amazing, Shell, I reckon. Just some nice freshly cooked prawns dipped in a little bit of chili sauce or something like that would work as well. A little bit of soy. All of those Asian flavors work really well, but your classic Italian tomato-based dishes work incredibly well too, with a little bit of salty pig meat in there, if you like a bit of that kind of thing, on top of a pizza, on pasta, just with your tomato and mozzarella. It's a really good combination. And tomato is really difficult to match to a lot of different wines. Tomato doesn't really go very well with Chardonnay. It doesn't go very well with Pinot Noir. It doesn't really go with Cabernet or Shiraz. It's not great with Sauvignon Blanc, I don't think, but then I don't think many things are, but we'll leave that discussion to another day. And the reason that tomato is difficult to match to wine is that it's got a lot of savoury umami flavour. So it's quite savoury, but it's also, and it's quite salty, and it's kind of, it doesn't have, like, it's not salty. It's even better with salt on it because that brings out more of that savouriness. But it's also got lots of sugar. So you're balancing this kind of savouriness with sugar and juiciness and all of those things. And so tomato fights with a lot of different wine styles, and it just really loves being matched to a Pinot Gris like this. Oh yes, also thank you, Paul and Rose, acidity as well. MSG is also high in umami. Umami is the character that, so when people talk about what your tongue can actually taste, we talk about sweet, sour, salty, and what's the other one? Bitter. And then they said, and then the scientists and the people who are kind of coming up with these pronouncements said there's something else, there's another thing, and it's that savouriness. And they called it umami, and you get it in mushrooms in high levels, you get it in tomatoes in high levels, you get it in it's that sort of meaty flavour. MSG is basically pure umami. So it's that. If you've ever had those Arnott savoury shapes, which are sort of salty biscuits with, I think it's probably just MSG that they sprinkle on the top of it, but it's just savoury. Richard's just arrived, so I'll just show you that again as I pass it over to him. Here you go, Richard. Cheers. Tomatoes do have, oh, okay, Pete. So yeah, tomatoes have quite a lot of naturally occurring MSG in them. So that's all linked in. That's what umami is. MSG is probably just another name for it. And I reckon it would be awesome with the prosciutto pizza. I thought Terra Macerata, Emily, how are you finding the Terra Macerata with it? I thought that might work quite well, but it will be slightly challenging because of the high sort of fishiness content, but it's also salty, and there's a slight smokiness to your Terra Macerata as well. Homegrown cherry tomatoes, absolutely. And how is the red capsicum working with it? Because I find red capsicum quite difficult to match to a lot of wines as well, because again, it's very juicy, it's very sweet, but it's also quite high acid and has a savouriness to it. So Lots of things going on. Hello, Jeff, by the way. I did see that you dropped in. Good to see you. And Michael, I'm glad to hear that the Manchego is working well with it. Manchego is a pretty wine-friendly cheese, and vine-ripened cherry tomatoes. How fantastic. Okay, I'm good. The soup was good with it. Yeah, if there's lots of tomato in it, the tomato is going to do the trick with this wine. So lots of fun. The other thing I say to people is this is a great wine to serve ever so slightly chilled on a summer's afternoon with a beautiful cheese and charcuterie platter. So it works very, very well with all of those things. So, Craig, do you sell much to restaurants? What cuisines? So, no, we don't sell it to a lot of restaurants, which is interesting. Our distributors in Melbourne, I think, find it slightly challenging, and they talk. It's really interesting. All the different sales teams have different focuses, and the guys up in Brisbane love it. So they sell more than their fair share of it. We don't make a huge amount of it anyway, but the guys in Sydney have sold a little bit of it, but it's not quite edgy enough for Sydney's natural wine bars, but it's a bit too unusual for Sydney's more mainstream restaurants. So it kind of sits somewhere in between. It's not cool enough for some people, and it's too cool for others. That's correct, Michael. Queenslanders can be quite smart that way. And it's a perfect wine for Queensland as well, I reckon, because it behaves like a red wine, but it's light and it's fresh, and you can serve it quite cool, as I said, on a warm day. Craig, I think this wine, and we've actually just had a request from a Japanese restaurant in Melbourne to have a look at this wine, and I think this wine is fabulous with Japanese food, as I said on my email on Tuesday. And those of you who are new will have already realised that I don't always send the explanatory email out on Monday, but I'll do it on Monday or Tuesday. I'll try and do it on Monday as often as I possibly can, but sometimes life gets in the way. Anyway, I think it's great with sushi and sashimi, particularly the pink fish, which is not because I'm just trying to match colour with colour, but I think that this wine has got the weight and the texture that needs a little bit more weight and texture in the fish, and salmon and tuna have a bit more richness and a bit more fat to them than the white fish. Actually works really well with scallop sashimi, which is delicious if you like that kind of thing. Italian food it works really well with, but the wine's a little wacky for most Italian restaurants. So it's really people who are going to be brave enough to hand sell it in restaurants. We sell most of it through cellar door, honestly, and I bang on about how well it goes with lots of different foods, and some people listen to me and take it away and do what I tell them, and some people don't, and that's all fine because we're all individuals. But I agree with you, Anne. I think it is a wine that needs food. It's not as good on its own. Fabulous with Jules pizzas. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I mentioned to you guys last week that we're celebrating 40 years since Mum and Dad bought this property at Moorooduc Estate this year. So we're thinking about events to do, and one event that we would like to do at some stage during the year, and it'll have to be relatively small, so we might do it a few times, would be just a really casual in the courtyard making Jules and Richard's pizzas, actually, Jeff, because Richard makes the bases and he cooks them. Jill and I put them together. So it's a bit of a team effort. Very, very simple, but beautiful pizzas because really good, simple ingredients. Anne is asking, how will it go with smoked barbecue? And I think it could cope with smoked barbecue. The smokiness, you were saying when we were talking about your smoked barbecue the other day, that it's quite intense, smoky flavours, and that might get in the way a little bit of the wine, but I reckon it's definitely worth a try. The wine's got enough personality to cope with some smoky flavours. It certainly works well with smoked salmon, so you could certainly go down that route, but it also handles, as I said to you before, charcuterie flavours and quite intensely smoked charcuterie. So I've had some very smoky ham, jamon, that kind of thing, which is pretty good with this wine. It's a wine that copes with a lot of strong flavours. So I think I said in my message that you could put some anchovies on your pizza and it would cope with that, or some black olives that would cope with that intense saltiness. It could, I think it could do really well with the smoked pork can. You'll just have to have a play around and try. It works well with duck as well. So it's pretty versatile. Craig, you could move down. Absolutely. We are going to publish those dates very soon, I promise. Mum and Dad and I have worked on the dates. We just have to tidy it up a little bit. And we'll be flicking those out to Wine Club members and Drinks with Kate members in the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to put them in your diary and book your flights and all that kind of thing, book in very soon. So something to look forward to. Let me talk to you. I know, Shell, smoked salty pig meat. It's pretty delicious. It's one of the things that I think if I went truly vegetarian, I'd miss the most. But it's also one of the things that I feel often the most guilty about eating when it comes to meat. But anyway, we'll put that aside as well. Duck for dinner, Alison. Yum. Chinese duck noodles with verdigris green and plum sauce. How fantastic. Let me tell you a little bit about how this wine is made, because, we should have a little bit of technical talk at some stage during this session. And I think that sorry, Jill was just talking and distracting me. It's a bit difficult when people come in and have conversations in the room while I'm trying to talk to you. She likes to do it to annoy me. Hello, Polly. So the wine. So Pinot Gris, and I'll be able to show you in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, some pictures of the Pinot Gris that we picked this year. The fruit comes in with so much colour on the skins. That was how we started this whole conversation about why do we make white wine out of Pinot Gris when it's got so much colour in the skins. And Dad and most people that I spoke to about it were of the opinion that it's because we expect Pinot Gris to be a white wine, which is absolutely true. And you can very easily make white wine out of grapes that have coloured skins by just pressing the juice away from the skins straight away and throwing the skins and the pips away and just using the juice to make wine. So that's how we make all of our white wine, basically, including our white Pinot Gris. Press it off straight away. The juice goes into barrel. The skins and pips go into the compost, and we ferment the juice on its own. There's a bit of pulp in there. When you squeeze an orange, you get some orange pulp in there as well as just the juice. Get the same thing with the wine. So there's some solids in there that kind of feed the wine and that kind of thing. But if you do that with red or white grapes, then you get white wine. If, however, you take the whole bunch of grapes and you can either get rid of the stalks, and we do, so we put it through the destemmer and we end up with whole berries. So we've got the skin, we've got the juice, we've got the pulp, and we've got the pips that go into the fermenter all together. And then we allow them to ferment. And because the skin and the pips and the pulp are in there, then one of the byproducts of fermentation is carbon dioxide, and actually churns the whole ferment up and pushes all of the solids up to the top of the fermenter. And one of our jobs as winemakers is to push those solids back down into the liquid so that we can extract colour and flavour and tannins from the skins. So during that active fermentation period, we'll stir or plunge the ferments twice a day. And that gets this colour into the wine very early on in the process. Once the fermentation's finished, then we'll then press it off and throw away the skins and the pips. And then we've got a pink wine that just needs some maturation in old oak barrels, and it matures in those barrels for about 8 months before we get it ready for bottling. So it's very simple winemaking. It has a little bit less time in barrel than the Pinot Noir, but apart from that, the winemaking is exactly the same as with our Pinot Noirs, and you end up with a wine that's pink with tannins and very different flavours. Craig is asking, what's the ratio of normal Pinot Gris to Pinot Gris on skins? It used to be that we made a lot more white Pinot Gris than we made Pinot Gris on skins. The wines are coming closer to each other as far as quantities are concerned. I couldn't tell you exactly what we did last year or what we're doing this year, but I would say that there's probably fairly similar quantities in 2022. We're planning to make similar quantities of white Pinot Gris and Pinot Gris on skins. It's been a bit of a surprise success for us. Surprise because we didn't know how it was going to turn out, and we didn't know whether people would like it. And even when we decided that we liked how it turned out and that we liked it, it's still quite a challenging wine for a lot of our consumer base. But in fact, we've discovered that, again, at Cellar Door, having it on for tasting has been a great thing for this wine because, again, even if they're not having it with food, people can sort of start to understand what the wine is, and they realise that it's not just a little light rosé, it's something a bit different. And it also helps people to understand what we're trying to do with Pinot Gris across the whole range at Moorooduc. So we now make 3 different Pinot Gris. We've got our Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris, we've got our Estate Pinot Gris, and so they're both white Pinot Gris. The Devil Bean Creek is picked a little bit earlier. It's a little bit more sort of crunchy pear fruit. We're going to taste that down the track in a little while later this year. We've got the Estate Pinot Gris, which we've discovered needs a little bit of time in bottle. So current release of that is 2017, and that's looking fabulous. But we've also, together as a group, tasted older Pinot Gris back to 2012, I think, which I would like to revisit sometime this year because I think those older Pinot Gris are looking remarkably special, which is really surprising for a lot of people for Pinot Gris. It was surprising to me when we started looking at them with a bit of age on them too. So Pinot Gris is a great variety, is often sort of downplayed or disregarded by wine snobs and winemakers and people who take wine seriously. And I think there are a lot of Pinot Gris out there in the marketplace that are kind of a bit light and crunchy and don't have a lot of flavour, that are fine if you just want that sort of wine. But that's not what we're trying to do here at Moorooduc. Paul and Roz, I think that's absolutely right. There's lots of people who wouldn't have ordered it because they've had bad experiences with Pinot Gris, or they assume that Pinot Gris is a great variety they don't like because they've tasted some of those kind of lighter, less serious wines. And if you treat Pinot Gris with love and care and affection and try and make serious wine out of it, then you get this. You get, oh, good Laura, I'm glad you finally managed to get a glass of wine. It's opening up beautifully, and Kay's picking up a little bit of orange blossom, which I absolutely agree with. It's really perfumed in quite a floral way, but then, as Alison has pointed out, it's really savoury as well on the palate. And it works with all those savoury foods as a result. It's a wine that sort of plays with all of your preconceptions about wine, which I would like to say actually that I think most Moorooduc Estate wines do that to a greater or lesser extent, but this is probably the most unusual wine that we make at the moment. And we're not trying to win any prizes for being weird and wonderful and wacky, but I think, as you say, Michael, this wine is a wine at Cellar Door that piques a lot of people's interest, particularly if you're travelling around the Mornington Peninsula and you're tasting lots of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Then to taste something a little bit different is exciting, and it puts things in maybe a slightly different perspective. So I think that's pretty cool, and I think that's what wine's supposed to do. It's supposed to take you sometimes on a new adventure. It's like, come over here for a minute and do this now, and another door opens and another wine experience reveals itself, which is what we want when we're having our little wine adventures. I do think that I agree with you, Kay, the orange blossom aromas are coming through there, as well as a bit more ginger. And Michael, you're saying that you bought it for a friend who loves Italian wine, and I think that's right. And I think that reflects back on the collective experience of the Moorooduc team. Obviously, I worked for an Italian wine importer before I came back to the family business, and I love Italian wines. I love the savouriness and the structure of them. Dad and Mum are both huge fans, particularly Dad, of Barolo, particularly from Italy, but really good Sangiovese as well. Gets a pretty good trot in this household. And Italian white wines, there's a savouriness and there's a textural quality to Italian wines that I think is very appealing, and it's certainly something that we find appealing in the wines that we make. We don't want our wines just to be sweet fruited and simple. We want that core of Mornington Peninsula fruit to shine through, but we're always looking for a bit more complexity and a bit more textural interest and some savouriness in the wine. So, and I think I agree, Craig. The wine, this is a personification of sort of the Moorooduc quest for texture and savouriness and complexity and something a little bit different. And I think that it's one of the reasons when people come into our cellar door and they taste our Chardonnay and they say, "Oh, I don't usually like Chardonnay, but this is delicious," or they taste Pinot Noir and say, "This is really different from most of the Pinot Noirs that I've tasted today." All of our wines elicit that reaction from people, mostly and hopefully in a good way. But I think this wine embodies it in a more obvious way, perhaps. I agree, Michael. Texture does equal interest, and wine that doesn't have texture, it can be textbook perfect wine, but if it doesn't have a texture that intrigues me, then I'm going to get sick of drinking it pretty quickly. The aromas and flavours can be great, but there needs to be something else there. Rob thinks, yes, Rob, it would be great with spaghetti bolognese. I've done it before. I highly recommend it. That's right. A positive reaction, hopefully, Craig, most of the time. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something else, but it's gone straight out of my head. But it's exciting. It's exciting to be able to drink this wine. And I haven't really had a chance to ask you guys how it's going with your. Some of you have said that you've enjoyed it with your tomatoes. How's it going with who's having fishy things, prawns and things like that? Is it working with your prawny flavours? While I'm waiting for you to respond to that, Alison has asked me to tell her more about texture. So Alison, I think it's when we're talking about texture, I think that a lot of Australian wine and a lot of New World wine is really beautifully made. It has beautiful aroma and fruit character, but often the feeling on the palate is a bit bland, if that makes sense. And when I'm talking about texture in wine, it's obviously an easier thing to talk about with red wine because red wine has tannin. This wine is actually, as I said before, this wine behaves and is made like a red wine, so it really is a very light red wine rather than a coloured white wine. So there's tannin here as well, and tannin is that character that you get. If you're not sure what I'm talking about with tannin gives you a grippiness and a bitterness on the palate, and it counteracts the sweetness of fruit, counteracts the acid. So acid and tannin kind of balance each other out and play against each other. And often tannin will hate spice, chili, that kind of thing, whereas this wine actually copes really well with slightly spicy food. You don't want it to be too spicy. I don't think it'd work with a Thai jungle curry or anything like that, but it does work with quite spicy food. Craig, did you have just plain watermelon, or did you have watermelon in a salad as suggested? Salted watermelon, I'm guessing. I think that I'm surprised at how well it goes with watermelon as well. I think it works really, really well. Prawns, great. Slow roasted vine tomatoes for Alison with salt and olive oil. Beautiful. Kevin is asking, do the French make Pinot Gris on skins at all? I'm not going to say it's never done because someone will prove me wrong almost immediately. It's not traditional. It's more traditional in Italy. In Italy, they call it ramato as a style, but it'll usually be much paler in colour. People talk about sort of onion skin colour to it, and usually in Italy they'll just have left it on skins for maybe a few hours maybe a couple of days. Raw watermelon, Craig, just plain raw watermelon. Ah, very good. Yum. Pinot Gris, prawn dumplings, prawn and ginger. Yum. Delicious. Okay, cool. So yeah, not traditional in France, Kevin, but I'm sure there'll be someone doing it. And because the French are really the French kind of almost invented the natural wine movement. This is not natural wine, but this would fall into the orange wine category, which is white grape varieties fermented on skins. And so you see quite a lot of skinsy white wines from the Loire in France, so Chenin Blanc or Sauvignon Blanc. I'm sure there'd be some people doing it in Alsace. I've not experienced it myself, but it's a style of wine that I really am only starting to understand the different countries' different traditions. I discovered this style of wine when I was in Italy in 2010. I was visiting my cousin who lives with her Italian husband in Rome, and her Italian husband is a beautiful man who works for the Pope. He used to be part of the Pope's private police force, and now he's a guard at the Vatican Museum. He's not one of those Swiss guards that wear the silly costumes. He's a real kind of security guard. Anyway, Roberto loves wine, and he's done a sommelier's course, and I flew in from Australia, and they picked me up from the airport, and he said, I've taken some days off work, and tomorrow we're going to Umbria. I'm like, okay, jet lag, don't worry about it. And he and Sarah and I drove to Umbria the next day, and he'd been, flicking through his book, and he wanted to take me to some special places that he'd discovered. One of those places that he'd never been to but had heard about served us all these different wines, and it was just the wife of the winemaker. He was out probably pruning the vines or something. She was there. She's like, okay, I can certainly do a tasting for you, no worries. And she showed us a couple of white wines. Then she showed us their Merlot, which was the best Merlot I've ever tasted. And I wanted to buy a bottle of that. And she showed us, it was really kind of light and floral and just delicious. Nothing like any Merlot that I'd ever experienced before. Anyway, that aside, she then said, oh, this is our special experimental wine. It's made from Verdicchio, which is a white grape variety, but we make it like a red wine. And we kind of said, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And she explained basically completely red wine making techniques, fermented on skins, left on skins for longer than we do, and finally bottled. But she said, as she poured it to us, she said, this was opened yesterday, but that's fine because it's actually best when it's been open for 4 days, which we kind of went, that's crazy. And we smelled it and tasted it. It was kind of dark yellow colour, and it smelt really vinous, really unusual, unlike anything that we'd smelt before, but in a pleasant and interesting way, intriguing way. And on the palate, it was very textural. Again, there were flavours, but it was more about sort of the way it kind of sat in the mouth and the textures in the mouth. So we bought it. She allowed us to buy a bottle from her, and we took it back to Sarah and Roberto's house, and we opened it and had a glass each night for the 4 nights that I was there. And she was right. It was best after 4 nights, 4 days open. This wine, I'm not sure if it goes 4 days, but I do think that, if you didn't feel like drinking the whole bottle tonight, which I know you all laugh at me when I say that, but if you kept the half bottle, even just like that, didn't even bother to decant it or anything, just pop that in a cool place, it'll be different, but it'll still be delicious in a completely different way tomorrow. So there's an experiment for you if you ever want to try it. You might have to buy another bottle of the Pinot Gris on skins if you've drunk it all tonight. But yeah, it works. It does really interesting things with oxygen in the bottle over 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours. I know, Peter and Karen, everybody says that. I know that the bottle will be finished by the end we finish chatting, but that's okay. I can dream. I'll be really interested to see how this wine ages because, again, we've only been making it for 5 years. So we've got bits and pieces, a few bottles here and a few bottles there. yeah, I don't know how well it's going to age, but the wine that's sort of 3-4 years older is looking really interesting at the moment. Okay, Jeff, spicy buffalo wings are good. Ranch dressing is bad. Sorry, I'm not. With this wine, I think this wine would struggle very hard with very spicy buffalo wings and ranch dressing. But if you're enjoying it, then that's great. I'll let you guys finish that conversation. That's all. The wing chat is blowing up. I'm ignoring it, Shell. I'm hoping it might go away. Emily, that's okay. I think that with Sarah and Roberto, we actually opened that wine, put it aside, we drank something else. So it wasn't that we were just being abstemious, we just needed to do the experiment. So if you ever feel like doing the experiment, you just need to make sure you've got another bottle of wine to drink while you're waiting for the oxygen to do its thing. Right, we've descended into blue cheese dressing now. And yep, I think that's probably enough of that, you guys. You can go off into your own little chat room and talk about buffalo wings. All good. Anyway, I think that the point is that this wine can cope with a bit of chili. It loves fish. It loves tomatoes. It loves things like mozzarella. It's a good cheese wine. It's a great charcuterie wine. And it's just a wine that makes me really happy because it's such a beautiful color, and it comes through with beautiful aromas and flavors. Craig had a good question earlier. Any wine not made yet? Oh, hang on. What did you say, Craig? I lost it. I think, Craig, you asked if there was any wine. Oh, is there any technical wine out there that you want to make but don't yet? Probably. Haven't thought of it yet. I actually, no, that's not true. And I just mentioned it to Dad yesterday or this morning, I think. But I've been tasting some wines recently that people that I admire as winemakers have made using concrete eggs. I think that's very interesting. I don't know much about them. I'm taking a lot of stuff on faith at the moment, which is not really how we do things at Moorooduc. Things have got to be tried and tested and that kind of thing. But if I've ever got a bit of spare money, I might buy myself a concrete egg to play around with. But that's somewhere. So they're very expensive. This wine, well, Rob, yeah, I think this wine still is experimental, and I think it will stay in the experimental range, but it's definitely at the moment a permanent fixture in the winemaking calendar. So I think that's. I hope that answers your question. So it will continue to be labelled with the wraparound duck label for the time being. We're considering putting it in a darker bottle because I think this packaging, as pretty as it is, shows off the colour really well, but it also makes people think that it's a rosé to put in the fridge, which it's not. So I think that's a bit confusing for people. Laura, I'm glad you're enjoying it with the pesto, and you went with the cashews in the end. And we haven't talked about pine nuts because you guys all got me distracted and I forgot. Look up pine nut metallic mouth, guys. Apparently, so this is just a little warning because I love pesto and I love pine nuts, but I was told a couple of years ago by another wine friend of mine that some pine nuts that are grown in certain parts of the world, and it has been noted in a couple of articles that I've read that China is the place that these pine nuts come from, but I'm not sure if it's exclusively China. Anyway, they had something to do with the clone of pine or where it's grown or whatever, give the pine nuts a character that you can't taste, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they make your mouth taste metallic and make everything that you taste after that taste metallic, including wine. So sometimes it lasts for just a couple of hours, but it can last for up to 2 weeks, according to the articles that I've read. I've not experienced it, but a couple of friends of mine who are very serious wine tasters have, and they said it's horrendous. And it probably like losing your sense of smell and taste when you get COVID. You just keep waiting for it to come back to normal again. So this is why Laura has commented on her pesto with cashew nuts in it, because we had a little conversation midweek, and I said pesto's great, but just be careful of pine nuts. So we decided cashews instead. So I'm glad it worked, Laura. I think cashews in pesto is fantastic, and I've been very lucky to eat pesto that has pine nuts that don't make my mouth go metallic thus far, touch wood. Alison, I think that's a very good reminder, because not everyone tasted previous vintages of this wine. The first of these Pinot Gris on skins that we tasted a few years back, which would have been the 2017 or the 2018, I can't remember which, had a very red wine nose to it. And I think even the 2019 was sort of a bit richer. This wine from 2020 is a little bit more herbal. It's a bit more floral. It's a bit more elegant. It's quite complex. And yeah, I personally think this is the best Pinot Gris on skins that we've made so far. Some people might have preferred the slightly richer, fuller flavoured ones. I'm not sure what you think, Alison. But I'm really pleased with the sort of the progression of style this wine has. I think also, Rob, in answer to your experimental sort of thing, the other thing that you'll notice is that this wine is not perfectly, it hasn't fallen perfectly clear. There's a little bit of cloudiness to it, which would not be acceptable to us in a Moorooduc Estate Pinot Noir or Chardonnay so much. But because this is our sort of experimental wine, it's actually not a bad thing for it to be just have a little bit less clarity, a little bit less polish. It's still clean, it's still beautiful, but yeah. So Peter and Karen, we're getting onto a long chat for me to be starting to talk about concrete eggs, but concrete eggs are just another fermentation vessel, and as Kay has pointed out, they're also known as amphora. Or amphorae, and Trofeo's got some, Queerleys have got some. There's a few people around the peninsula and around Australia that play around with concrete eggs. There's two important things about them. Concrete is quite a cool, non-reactive substance, so it doesn't allow the wine to change temperature quickly. So while the wine ferments and is giving off heat, then it holds the heat in the wine for longer than it would in stainless steel, which kind of lets the heat out more. Also, our stainless steel fermenters are open top. They're big 2-ton open top fermenters, whereas the eggs are closed, or they've got small sort of mouths at the top of them, and people put the skin and the juice in for fermentation. The thing I don't know, I've never seen proof of, but have been told and think sounds really cool, but I'd like some more scientific sort of explanation before I believe it completely, is that the shape of the egg produces movement in the wine as it's fermenting. So you get the wine making spirals, and that has an effect on, according to the people who like making wine in concrete eggs, that has an effect of polishing the tannins. That's the short version of the story. We can talk about it more down the track. We might even see if we can find some egg wines for you to try. They'll only be ones that I think are really special, and they might be a bit expensive for the $250 pack, but we could maybe do a little side project there. I think Trofeo has clay. So they're clay amphorae. Concrete is not good environmentally. You use them for a long time, Pete, if that helps. Concrete and clay are different. Clay will actually absorb the wine, and the wine kind of breathes in and out. Whereas, as I understand, with the eggs, it's like putting them in stone. It doesn't leach flavour into the wine and the wine doesn't kind of go in and out of the concrete. But I don't know enough about it. I'll do some research. If I think it's worth it and I can find the money, maybe I'll buy an egg. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep drinking other people's wines that I like, as well as our wine that I also like. So that's a long way of saying, I don't know, Craig, but if I think of something else that we want to do, then we might do it. But I think we're pretty happy with what we're doing at the moment. Yes, lots of Georgian clay. There's a lot that are really awful, and there are a lot that are really challenging. And but I wouldn't make one like that. A wine that I think that you should try if you're interested in it is the, and now I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the jolly producer. I'll do my research. I'll come back to you because I've just lost my mind. And anyway, it's wine is like drinking dirt. Yes. So this has always been one of my big arguments about those sort of wines. And this is part of the whole natural wine movement. A lot of people who use amphorae and who use concrete fermenters will also not use sulfur and are interested in sort of trying to be as non-interventionist as possible, which means no quality control. We like to make wine as naturally as possible, but with some quality control. So we use a little bit of sulfur in our winemaking. We keep things clean, and that's never going to change at Moorooduc. So don't worry, we're not going down any crazy paths. This is probably about as crazy as we get at Moorooduc, but I'm glad that you guys have enjoyed it. Andrew refuses natural wine. Do you know what? We don't really have time to have this conversation now, but I might include a little. There's a Master of Wine who's just passed her dissertation, who did some really interesting research into what actually gives people a headache when they drink wine, and sulfur actually kills off the bacteria that is the cause of most people's headaches when they drink wine. So natural wine is actually less good for you than wine that has some sulfur in it. Anyway, I can point you towards the link of that. Michael is bringing me back to the fruit flavours in this wine. And really for me, this wine is not so much about fruit flavours. It's there's a little bit of, as I said, a little bit of pickled plum, like Japanese pickled plum. So it's plum, but it's sort of a little bit tangy, or a bit like the plum sauce that I've been making from Deb and Rob's plums. There's a ginger character to it. I know that's not fruit, Michael. There's a little bit of rhubarb and strawberry in there, but the fruit characters are quite subtle. And so there's lots of kind of layers of things going on, which is why I think this wine goes so well with the flavours that we've discussed tonight. Anyway, we're creeping up on the hour and we're losing a few people, and I think it's probably time for us to finish up. It is a bit umeboshi now, Shell, absolutely. Yangara is the producer who makes very good concrete egg wines. They make a very good Grenache, so check that out. It might change your minds. We're going to finish up. Next week, we're back to Chardonnay, and we're doing the 2019 Robinson Chardonnay, which, as I said at the beginning of the hour, is very apt because we're picking our first Robinson Chardonnay fruit for the year tomorrow. So I'll be able to tell you all about how it's looking. Thanks so much, everyone. Director's cut, absolutely. Craig will try and be a bit more under control next week. I'll be in vintage by then, so I'll probably not have as many words. Anyway, cheers, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Take care. Thanks.